Well, hot damn, that's a finale. Hello, interwebs. I'm here to review the last episode, sadly, of the Book of Boba Fett, Chapter 7, In the Name of Honor. As per usual, spoiler-free up front, spoilers in the back. Let's start spoiler-free. Hot freaking damn, this was awesome. This was legitimately a true epic finale. A lot of it is front to back action. There's like action upon action upon action upon action. And yet what I loved about this most is that all of the action, pretty much every single beat in this fight, while a little bit predictable once you kind of got into it and you started realizing what the steps of this were going to be, all came out of extensions of everything that had been set up throughout the series. Every piece of this epic finale had a setup earlier and was paid off down the line, and it was just truly phenomenal. And they went like, this was movie quality stuff. Like, there again, I don't want to go into spoilers, but there is stuff that happens in this episode that I'm like, holy crap, I never thought I would see that in a Star Wars thing. It was just freaking amazing, and I was just nerding out. But with all that being said, I have to go back to the thing that really made this work for me. Again, it's all action, but it was all set up. And I have made no bones about in the past few reviews of this channel that I had a big problem with this show structurally, and I'm not going to take that back. If I was sort of pulling back and doing a big season review of the show, I do think it had a very big problem with pacing and structure. And I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that the last two episodes basically just diverted to be episodes of The Mandalorian. Episodes that I really, really loved, but diverted the attention from where things were. So when we came back into this episode, it was a bit jarring because I'm like, oh yeah, Boba was dealing with all this stuff. All this other stuff had come up. And so that made it a little bit jarring. But realizing what they were using those two episodes to set up and get us to and pay off and really culminate here, I think really, really worked for me. And I think it all just made everything feel grand and epic and feel like a true like 7-hour movie that we got here. And this was just the last act of it, and it just like knocking all the dominoes down. Again, I still think structurally there was problems. I still think that we could have maybe paced it out differently. And I think my biggest issue is a couple revelations about the villains, the Pikes, that I wish had been maybe forecast a little bit earlier or had developed the Pikes a little bit more. I still think they're kind of a bland antagonist overall. So while there's a lot of cool stuff happening on the hero side with payoff, there's not much going up on the villain side other than our boy Cad Bane, who showed up just in the end of last episode. And so we don't really get, I mean, as much as I love Cad Bane and I love everything that comes along with him, he is just basically doing the best he can based on prior knowledge, not what's in this show. So everything in this show was set up on the hero side of this fight. The villains, while Cad Bane was particularly badass, was not at all really well set up within this series. And so that's probably my biggest thing. But honestly, at the end of the day, I think that this was just a true grand epic finale. And again, pulling out to the series, I have issues, but looking at just this episode, it was phenomenal. I cannot tell you how much fun that I had just watching this thing. So I adored it. It will probably shine a brighter light on this entire season as a whole. Now I know where it was all going, though I still have my issues with it. But that being said, let's get into spoilers so I can talk about some of the nitty-gritty, because there is some nitty-gritty to talk about. So getting into the spoilers here, I'm just going to go through and just pick some things, and I'm going to try and go chronological, but I'm sure I'm going to miss something. But there was just a lot going on here that I loved. I particularly loved that the biker gang, who a lot of people made fun of, that they convinced Boba at the top of the episode to stay in the city, and that it wasn't just like, oh, we're going to go off to Jabba's palace, which would have been an easy choice. I mean, it's the nostalgia choice, I'm sure, for many people. So to set the show in Mos Espa and Boba actually having to stay there to fight for the city, I think symbolically really rooted this series, and I also just think like showed Boba Fett's sense of honor. Again, I'm really loving how this show just showcased his character for a lot of the first half of this series. Then we get Cad Bane being a badass, and he learned from the Pikes that they were the ones that killed the Tuskens. I kind of figured that was going to be the case. I kind of figured the biker gang having killed them was a little bit easy for a kind of payoff for that. And so I like that Cad Bane goes and confronts Boba with that and basically almost gets Boba to fight early when he wasn't ready at the moment, and kind of provokes him in that moment. I like that Fennec talks him down, and it was just a very tense moment because you could see Boba being a headstrong idiot, and I like that he was talked down from that moment and was able to sort of keep his head on for it. Then we get basically everything going to crap because Fennec had made this plan where everyone was sort of being watched, but you just see every single one of Boba's allies just falling. You see Nubaka falling, the pig people people dying, sadly, poor pig people, and the biker gang get cornered. So really just sending him off with no one and really putting him in his darkest place. Again, great arc for the action going on here, even though it was just a lot of action. And it brought me to one of my favorite dialogue scenes in this episode where Boba and Mando are sort of talking it out, and Mando's like, I will stay here with you, I'll fight for your honor, even though I know I'm probably going to die. And Boba's like, you believe in that bantha fodder? And Mando saying yes, and Boba saying, I respect that. I just like that, like, they're two men who, like, came together and, like, understand each other, even though their ideologies aren't exactly the same. They have a great deal of respect between these two men, and I loved that. And then I love the whole sequence with the Twi'lek being like, I can talk this down, I can negotiate for you to negotiate a surrender. I was raised on Coruscant, but that doesn't make me better than you. You get this, like, Coruscant elitism, which it makes sense within the world of Star Wars. Not something you immediately think about, but the idea that Coruscant people educated there would have this sort of, like, holier than thou than this backwater planet idea, I think is just makes perfect sense, fits exactly within this world, and I liked that. And then I liked the guy going out with Boba's words, and Boba's like, nothing, give you nothing, and just gets him, like, almost killed, which was a good little comedic beat within all of this. But then from there, we get all hell going loose, and it was just like setting up, knocking down. They start a fight, we almost get Boba and Mando in this really epic battle, almost get killed, but then they get saved by the biker gang, by everyone, by different people coming in. New Baka comes in, the biker gang comes in. They all get saved them at different moments and sort of escalating the fight bit by bit, which was all really cool. And again, a lot of really wonderful payoff. I think my only big negative here is that Grogu does show up, which is, again, a great payoff for that story where Grogu did choose to leave Luke Skywalker, and kind of makes sense. And it kind of shows the failure of Luke as a teacher that we will see going into, Return of the Jedi stuff and, the Star Wars trilogy there. And so I like that that's sort of implied here, that Luke's failure as a teacher, because he is just following the old Jedi ways of, like, you must, remove all ties to people, which is the thing that really made the Jedi in the first place fall. And so I'm liking that critique even subtly in the background here of that. But going back to my knock, I wish we actually hadn't gotten to see Grogu show up. I liked him showing up in the X-Wing and everything like that. It was nice to see to a degree, but it kind of it had me anticipating him showing up eventually. Though I did like when Mando does see Grogu, he's just sort of like, what are you doing here? And he's just like, oh, you got the shirt. And it was such dad energy that I got from him. I was just like, oh, that's so sweet. And then when Grogu gets knocked off, Mando just holds him and captures him. It was just heartwarming to see those two and those moments. But then we get these sort of like big metal droidicas showing up. Boba and Mando can't really defeat them, even with the Darksaber. But then we get the most badass thing ever. Boba Fett riding a freaking Rancor. Like, I'm sure that was like some fanboy somewhere's dream. I know there was like concept art that someone threw out there that people like fan art of that. And it was just like, this is like, Star Wars nerds' wet dream just going on here. And just tearing apart the city. It looked amazing. It was a mix of, looked like practical effects and digital effects when he was jumping around, blowing up things and attacking things and like eating stuff and destroying these droidicas was just so cool. And then when he's like King Kong on the side of the building and Mando has to stop him and like bites him and he can't eat his helmet was also wonderful. But then we get a final payoff of Grogu using the Force, which he had used a couple times in the fight, but really just having a standoff against a freaking Rancor. And we see this tiny Grogu against a Rancor and how powerful he actually is and the little hints of what's to come. And this feels like payoff to everything we've seen going on in The Mandalorian. And just was so cool. I truly loved all of that sequence. But then we also have Cad Bane showing up. I was a little bit frustrated by this to a degree that the Rancor just sort of ran away at Cad Bane, though I get Boba's not riding on him anymore, so he's probably lost control. And then the fight between Boba and Cad Bane was also badass. I like that Cad Bane gets the one up on him and actually is going to defeat him because he is the faster guy. I mean, from everything we know about Cad Bane, he is the faster gunslinger. But I do like that Boba's eventually able to defeat him using his skill that he learned from the Tuskens with the stick. That was sort of the trick that allowed him to win in this fight, that it wasn't anything else that he'd used, it was from the Tuskens. A nice payoff in the character there. I will say I'm a bit sad to see Cad Bane die here. He was easily one of my favorite characters in the Star Wars animated lore. I always like to see him, and I'm sure there'll be many more stories that he'll pop up in earlier stories, whether it be novels, animated stuff, things like that. But I was just sort of like, yeah, I knew it was just how it had to go, but I would have liked to see him show up in more things, but alas, it was cool. He did die like a badass, but sadly, just not to see him anymore after this, unfortunately. And then in the final parts of the episode, we get the Pikes cutting and running, and Fennec shows up and murders them all. Again, a little bit disappointing in the fact that we didn't have the Pike build up. Again, that's a bigger knock. Like, I wish the Pikes had been built up more so that this death felt more satisfying for them. And I will say, I wish Boba had been the one to kill them, because they were the one that killed the Tuskens, and I feel like that would have felt a little bit more satisfying. But I guess you do need Fennec having something to do in this fight, and it made sense that she would be more stealthy and sort of be an assassin rather than sort of in the middle of the big fight with everyone else. So I get why they went this way, and while the Cad Bane Boba fight was wonderful, I do feel like the Tusken, arc that Boba went on was better served if he had been the one to kill the Pikes and not Cad Bane. I think that probably would have been a better, more fulfilling moment for me. I think that's probably another knock that I would put against it. But at the end of the day, we get everyone celebrating, everyone goes off, we get the wonderful fun moments with Mando and Grogu sort of flying off in the ship, and Grogu wanting to go fast and like enjoying that with, like, again, very dad energy, like, okay, we'll do the car thing. Was just wonderful to see. And then we get a little hint in the after credits of the modifier guy maybe doing some stuff on Boba and modifying him. If I was to make a guess, maybe he's like gonna modify his face so that we could have a different actor playing Boba Fett going forward. If they wanted to have him do stuff going forward in the lore, they can have sort of a different actor come in, because the actor's getting a little bit older and up there. I hope that's not the case, because I do really like him as Boba Fett, but we'll see if that continues to be the case. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think just looking back on it, while I have a few knocks here and there, like Grogu showing up too early, and I having kept a surprise, the Pikes being sort of not built up enough, and the payoff of the Pikes with Fennec killing them didn't feel as satisfying. And also, the build-up to this episode could have been structured better in terms of its pacing and who got focused when and how we got build up into this. That being all said, I do really appreciate this episode. I think it was fantastic, a grand finale. I think the only other thing that made me sad, I just also forgot to mention, is the Marshal is actually dead. I loved his character, so I'm sad that he was. I was hoping that he would still be alive by the end of the episode, but unfortunately it sounds like he is officially dead. But regardless, I think that this was a strong payoff, despite my problems structurally with this series. I think it was well worthwhile and an epic finale, and I truly enjoyed it, and it made me very excited to see what will eventually come in. Presumably Mandalorian Season 3 will be the next thing, or, we have Obi-Wan, Andor. There's a bunch of Star Wars stuff coming on the horizon, especially on TV land, less so in the movies, strangely enough, but definitely in TV land, there's a lot to get excited about, and I'm very pumped for Mandalorian Season 3, most of all. So beyond all of that, I'm excited to hear what all of you think down in the comments, so let me know what your thoughts are. But beyond all of that, I hope that you, as always, live long and stay sexy.